Good morning. This is certainly not the place that I expected to meet you, certainly not on Sunday morning, but due to a situation as it's going, we have felt that it's best to cancel our services. But I still wanted to bring you a message. I was tempted to do it from the pulpit, but that would have seemed very awkward to me to be speaking in the place where normally you are as well. It would have been weird, so I figured choose a space that is different and make it different so that I'm comfortable and hopefully you're comfortable listening to a message as well. I wanted to bring a message today from the Word of God, from Luke chapter 7, verses 11 to 17. There we read, "Soon afterward, Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went along with him. As he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and a large crowd from the town was with her. When the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, 'Don't cry.' Then he went up and touched the bier they were carrying him on, and the bearer stood still. He said, 'Young man, I say to you, get up.' The dead man sat up and began to talk, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. They were all filled with awe and praised God. 'A great prophet has appeared among us,' they said. 'God has come to help this people.' This news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding country." The thought that I was having as I was looking at this passage and meditating on it and preparing for it was the question of who cares? Who cares? So many times we find in situations that people don't care, that so many people can be heartless. Certainly in a situation that we're going through right now, we see people who are considered, who are caring, but we also people see that don't care. Now we have, of course, seen this on a massive level. Well, we haven't seen it, I didn't experience myself, but certainly things like the Holocaust, where Jews were being taken and being killed, and people just turned a blind eye. So many people, so many nations just turned away and in one way or another justified or rationalized. And unfortunately, like the Holocaust, has been incident after incident before that and after that of people just not seeming to care. But I want to give an illustration that I've used before of a situation that occurred in New York. And it was back in March 13, 1964. And it was around 3:15 a.m. with a young lady named Catherine Kitty Genovese. She was coming home 3:15 in the morning. She was parking her car, and she was walking back from the parking lot when she realized someone was following her. So she started to speed up. The man chased her and stabbed her in the back, and she cried out, "Oh my God! He stabbed me! Help me!" And people heard this. The neighborhood heard this, but yet no one intervened. One man did call out, "Let the girl alone," and this made the person who had stabbed her run away. And so now Genovese is there stabbed, and she's crawling, and she goes into a hallway. And again, no one's come to help her. And again, 10 minutes later, the person who had stabbed her comes back again and continues to attack her. And she cries out, "I'm dying, I'm dying." The man goes on to rape her. All this goes on for half an hour. It isn't until 4:15 a.m. that somebody finally calls the police, and they come, and of course, it's too late. But 38 people heard her cries. 38 people. And all of them, for one reason or another, did not intervene. Some just not caring. Others just, they were too tired. They didn't want to get up. One man actually wanted to help, but his wife stopped him and told him, "Don't get involved," and so on and so forth. And it goes on. And certainly when we see that, it's heartbreaking, the thing that humans would do that. I mean, all they had to do really was call the police at least, try to do something. The Barna Group came out with a report as to why people stay away from church. And it wasn't the coronavirus. Not yet, at least. 21% said because hypocritical behavior of church people. 21% said strict, inflexible beliefs. 12% said worship service is too long, boring, etc. 9% said too much emphasis on giving. And 37% said air of superiority, lack of concern among the church. In other words, they really don't care. So it's very important. And so we see all these things that are going on, certainly with the coronavirus and people, whether they care or not care. And certainly we see people that have died because of the coronavirus. And we know that every single person that dies now enters eternity. And the question is, have they entered eternity without Christ? And we should care about their well-being, their physical well-being, and most certainly their spiritual well-being. Jesus certainly cares. And Jesus not only cares, but he acts upon that compassion. And we see that in this passage. This is only one of 3 occasions where Jesus brings somebody back from the dead. And as I don't like calling it resurrection. Now, those of you who study with me know why I don't call it resurrection. Jesus had a resurrection. He basically resuscitated these people. They came back to a life they had, not to a new life of the new age to come. So he does this 3 times. And in this passage we see his care, his concern, and his compassion to what seems otherwise to be a very hopeless situation. And I want us this morning, as we contemplate about who cares, to look at Christ and see in the manner in which he does care, and how it speaks to the way that we are to care for others as well. So first of all, let us say a word about Jesus, what Jesus saw. He saw people in need of compassion. He also saw the need that was before him. So here we are in this town of Nain, and it almost sounds like, like a typical odd scene where 2 crowds are about to almost clash into each other, about to run each other. Here's Jesus with disciples and a crowd following him, seeing all the miracles he's doing, all the wonders and things he's doing. And here's a poor widow who's coming with her son to bury him. And when Jesus encounters this, we read in verse 13 those powerful words, when the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, don't cry. Jesus ministers to a woman who's in a helpless, hopeless situation. It's helpless because it's the circumstances of life. There are things that we can control. There are things that we can get a handle on and say, well, I'm not going to let this control me. I'm not going to let this happen. And we're able to do that. But there are things that are beyond us. Certainly, the death of this child is beyond her. She had no control over this situation. And it's a dire situation for her. She's lost her friend, her companion, her only son, only child. Well, we're not told that she had any daughters, but in that culture, to be without a husband and to be without a son to then take care of you, that's it. You were as good as dead. But it's a helpless situation because it's beyond her strength and her circumstances. She cannot do it herself. But it's hopeless because of what it means. A.T. Robertson, the great Greek scholar, said, the death of a widow's only son was the greatest misfortune conceivable. She has lost everything. She has lost everything. She has nothing. She has no one to take care of her. Most likely she'll end up living on the streets, becoming a beggar. She has no future to look forward to. There is no children, no grandchildren, no nothing. Everything has been lost in this moment for her. So a situation that was bad enough already, that she was a widow, now becomes even a worse situation because of this. But in the midst of that, in the midst of this horrible situation where everything is hopeless, everything is helpless, you feel like that's it, it's over, there come these beautiful words that Jesus saw her. Saw her. Again, it's not simply that he looked upon her like he's passing by and you see someone. It's that great sense of looking deep into a person to feel the sensitivity to what's going on to that person. Pay special attention to her. So it's very different than simply that he was glancing at her and noticed her and kept walking. It's not that at all. It's that she has captivated his attention. And that's pretty amazing when we think about it, that God, the creator of the universe, the one who's created all things, the one who doesn't need anything, that he would see us, that he would actually be concerned about us. That is a tremendous word from God, showing his great love and concern for us. That he doesn't just view you. He's not up from heaven going, oh yeah, no, they're going through this horrible time. No, it's that he sees you. He sees you. He sees your heart. He sees your circumstance. He sees your needs. He sees your fear. He sees all these concerns that you have. This is a compassionate God. And again, so compassionate that he's not simply viewing us. Because here's Jesus in the flesh, God in the flesh. God takes on flesh to be with us, to share in our misery and pain, and to heal us and to redeem us. So he does. He looks, but it's it's a question of people who just look and people who really see, who are able to see what's really there. I remember a story of William Carey, who was a shoe cobbler in a small village in England, and that shoe stop, that place where he did the work, is still there, remembering him and the great work that he did. But the story goes that he would look out the window and he would see the people and he would see things, but he would see beyond that. And when he looked out that window, his heart would yearn for those who were lost, and imagining them and thinking about how to reach them. Well, and he did that. He became a missionary to India. And not only a missionary to India, he became the father of the modern missionary movement. Again, because he saw. He was able to not barely just look at the external, but to really look and see the need of the person, be sensitive to what they're going through. John the Apostle tells us in 1 John chapter 3, verses 16 to 18. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. If any one of you has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in you? Dear children, let us not love with words or tongue, but with actions and in truth. Here is Jesus when he sees our circumstances, that he lay aside he laid down his life. It means something like laying aside something, divesting oneself of a thing. The word is used in John chapter 13, verse 4, when it says that Jesus took off his outer garment in order to wash the feet of the disciples. Jesus gives up a great deal. He lays down his life for us. And that shows the great love that he has. But his love, again, is not simply in words. Gee, I feel bad for you. Oh, I'm so sorry you're going through this. It's an action. Love is always an action. It cannot merely look and see and have that intensity. It is always moved to action. As James reminds us in his letter as well, he says, suppose a brother or sister is without clothes or daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, make warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? Again, what good is your faith if in a time of crisis, a time of need, there is a cry, someone crying out for help, and yet we don't pay attention, we don't care. We should care. Certainly the Lord cares. And because we are his disciples, because we are his children, the same compassion should be within us. And that's leading me into the next point. It's not simply that Jesus cares, he also feels her pain. We see again that is so important. It's again not simply to see me, but to feel what I'm going through. So many are like the man to whom a friend said, the problem in this country is ignorance and indifference. Would you not agree? And the man said, I don't know, and I don't care. There's nothing worse than seeing a society of people that don't care. It is heartbreaking, above all things, when we see a parent who doesn't care for their child. I don't know, I can't think of anything worse so far as compassion than when you see that. When you see so many parents, you wonder, why did you have children to begin with? Why would you bring any life into this world? But to bring someone to this world and to not care for them, not love them, not provide for them, not help them, to treat them like trash. Some people are just throwing away their children, literally. Others just not concerned at all. And they're more concerned about themselves and having fun and doing this. And how many households are like that? You know, I saw a thing on Facebook. It's like, let's feel sorry for the children who now, instead of being able to go to school where they feel a sense of protection and a difference in their lives, they're back in a home where they don't have that. We don't have the love of mother and father and that kind of concern and a real indifference. So that's one of the most heartbreaking. Certainly it's heartbreaking when we see it in the school system. When we see teachers that are not concerned about their students. No compassion. You're just a number. You're just, no need whatsoever to worry about you. A person's out sick, then this is happening, that's happening. They have no real intimacy to be concerned about what's going on with them. And certainly, we would feel the same way when we see politicians that don't have a heart for the people that they rule over. If we saw our president being heartless and going off and playing golf or something or doing something selfish, in a crisis like this, all of us would be heartbroken and be like, oh my goodness, doesn't he care? Which has amazed me because our president has received so much critique lately, and yet here's a man who's constantly out there exposing himself as well. He's not hiding in a bunker somewhere. He's not, he's a man who's exposing himself to the very virus that's attacking us, and that's because he cares, and he's trying to help the American people, and he's trying to do everything possible. But when we see politicians that don't care, again, it's heart wrenching because you put people in that context, in that place, to take care of you. However, in our text, the compassion of Jesus not only sees people, he shares their pain. Notice in verse 13 again. When the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, don't cry. His heart went out. He said he had pity. He had compassion. This is the same word that is used about the king when the man comes to him and says, and he owes this great debt and he can't pay it back. And he says, please, please have mercy on me. I'll pay it back. And the king knows there's no way in a million years you can pay back. But his heart goes out to him. He has compassion. It's the same word that's used as a Samaritan. Here's a Samaritan and he sees a Jew. And Jews and Samaritans hated each other. And yet when the Samaritan saw the Jew, he didn't see a Jew. He didn't see, a man or a woman or whatever. He saw a human being. He had compassion. The things that unite us are greater than the things that don't unite us. And things that make us different, whether we're from Cuba, Korea, or wherever, those are accidentals. They're not important. The essence is that we're human beings, that we are created in the image of God, that we're uniquely made in a certain way that certainly not only makes us like each other, but makes us different from even the animal kingdom, in that we can reason, that we can do certain things. So yes, it makes us unique. And to look, again, Samaritan sees that person and sees him as a person, not as a Jew, not as a man, as a woman, or anything else, or a class thing, or an economic thing. What can I get at? Oh, this man, if I help him, can he ever help me back? No, he has compassion, and that's what we're supposed to have. And certainly it's the same word that's used when the prodigal son comes home and the father sees him. His heart goes out to him. He has compassion. He runs to his son. This is the word that is used here. To say that Jesus is moved by her situation is to put it mildly. I like the way Matthew Henry says it in his commentary. He says, he was troubled for her. His eye affected his heart. I love that. He was troubled for her. His eye affected his heart. He sees her situation and he is moved. We have a God who is just as emotionally charged as we are. Where do we get our emotions? Where do we get our compassion, our concern, our yearning? It's from the same God who created us. And he has it to the nth degree, and he has it perfectly. Not like us, where ours can be tainted by mixed motives, etc., but not him. But when he sees us, he's not someone who's untouched, unmoved, unconcerned. He's completely moved by our circumstances. The question is, are we? Unfortunately, we live in a culture where I think so many times, because we do watch television, and maybe too much television. And really, I would encourage you not to watch that much television. If you can put down that remote control, and I'm glad I'm not looking at the congregation, because the people he's thinking about me, he's looking at me. So I think I can speak more frankly here, because I feel freedom. Put that in the remote control. Actually, spend more time with your family, first of all. How many people are working, they come home, they don't spend time with their children, or now they're home. Now I have my daughter home, and yeah, in part it's more tiring, because now I have to be a pastor, husband, and teacher for kindergarten student, and I'm going through lessons with her, but again, to spend time with her rather than spending time on the TV and sharing with the family. But instead of having the things like television, because again, I think in television we view so many things, whether it's not only through the fictional stuff that we watch, but even in the news, that we become desensitized. We don't feel the way we should feel. It's almost like when deaths start piling up, we start becoming numb and shutting down, because it's like 200, 400, 600. A crisis here, a crisis there. Today is this, tomorrow is that. There's the rebellion over here, there's a fighting over there, there's genocide over here. And we become, I think, numb to the reality of our neighbor and the concerns that people have. And I think it's important. And worse yet, unfortunately, is that we live in a culture where it promotes a narcissistic mindset, where people are more concerned about themselves. I remember when I was younger, I learned a little rhyme. I said, I don't have it in my notes, see if it comes back to me. It says, there once was a man named Narcissus who thought he was very delicious. So he stared at the pool, stared at his face in the pool, and his folly today is still with us. Something like that. He constantly was looking at himself in the water, and he was so in love with himself. And that, some people are so in love with themselves. They're so concerned about themselves and not about others. And so we do have, unfortunately, a culture where it's promoting narcissistic mindset. It's all about me, 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 me. Dr. Les Carter states concerning narcissists, narcissists do not consider the pain they inflict on others, nor do they give any credence to others' perceptions. They simply do not care about thoughts and feelings that conflict with their own. They only care about themselves. And we see it not simply in somebody looking into water and remembering and thinking how beautiful they are, how wonderful I am, and only concerned about themselves. We see it in people who are out there fighting over toilet paper. You have to be so self-centered when you have 15 things of toilet paper and the other person has none, and they ask you for one, and you're like, no, you're hogging it up. You're like, wow, really, this is it? You had so much sense of compassion. You thought about giving some money to St. Jude's Hospital, but all of a sudden now someone's asking you for a roll of toilet paper and you're saying no. It's insane. It's insane. But again, we unfortunately in too many ways promote a narcissistic culture. When you think about things in life, what are the questions normally asked? How do you feel about it? What do you think? It's all about us, how we feel it, how we perceive it, how we think. And we hardly ever ask about, how do you think that other person perceives it? How do you think they feel? Real compassion is going beyond this. And of course, Jesus does just that and teaches us to be that way. But again, he sees the need. He sees it for real in a penetrating way. He has real compassion. And then he acts upon it. But the way he does is quite shocking. We don't really get the impact of it in the English as you do in the Greek. Because what he says to her is, don't cry. But what you don't realize by reading that is that it's a present imperative. He's saying to her, he's giving her a command. Yeah, that's incredible, a command. Stop crying. Stop crying. Don't cry now and don't cry again. Present imperative. Continually stop crying. Don't cry anymore. That's pretty amazing. Jesus forbidding her to cry. Now that sounds outrageous. That almost sounds insensitive. But we have to realize that it's not, because he knows what he's about to do. And what he's basically saying to her, and here's what we, of course, have the advantage of having the text and be able to study it, is that we understand in the Gospels who Jesus is. This woman doesn't understand who Jesus is. Maybe she heard some rumors, but she really doesn't know him. But we already read the Gospels and are studying the Gospels. Here we're on the Gospel of Luke, and we know what Luke is trying to tell us, that here is life. Here is life incarnate. Jesus is the real life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to me, no one comes to the Father except through me. He is the life. He is real life, real, genuine life. He is what we should have, what we need. Not simply to be existing, but to be alive as God created us to be. And that's what he promises to us, that we would have life and have it more abundantly. Not only that we would have this life and be able to enjoy this life the way we're meant to enjoy this life, but that we would have eternal life, the life of God, the life of the age to come would be our life as well. So when the conflict occurs, when these two crowds meet, it's not simply two crowds. We have two different issues, two different parts of life, death and life. Death is confronting life. Life is confronting death. And here is the life of God, and life of God prevails. Again, very, very powerful. Look what it says in verses 14 and 15. Then when he went up and touched the bier they were carrying him on, and the bearers stood still, he said, young man, I say to you, get up. The dead man sat up and began to walk. And Jesus gave him back to his mother. Wow. How powerful. He tells him to wake up again, as if someone who is sleeping. Actually, the term is also used medically for someone who is sick and is now recovering. And Jesus looks at it as a medical condition, not as an eternal fate. He's not finished. It's not over yet. It's not over until he says it's over. And he's the giver of life. He is life himself. And he stands there and brings this child back to life. And this is why, as Christians also, we have to look at life and death differently than other people. We cannot look at death the way other people look at death. Some people look at death, and for them it is finality. It is the end. There is no more. They have come to a place where they do feel helpless and hopeless and completely hopeless. But not us. This is why Paul tells us in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 and 14. Brothers and sisters, we do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. For we believe that Jesus died and rose again, and so we believe that God will bring with Jesus those who have fallen asleep with him. Again, those who sleep are like napping. They're not dead. They're only sleeping. God will awaken them in the resurrection, and we will receive the resurrection body. That's why even this young man who's come back to life, that's not his final life. The final life is when Jesus calls him, and he rises from the grave, and he receives his new body. That is the true resurrection. Jesus is the resurrection, the life. So when Jesus confronts something, that thing has to give way to Jesus. And death ultimately is defeated and gives way to Jesus. As I mentioned before in a sermon, when we come to a moment of death, we don't come alone. We come there with Christ. And we don't cross over alone. We cross over with Christ. But there is hope. I remember years ago I read a book on the afterlife written by an atheist. I was just so curious. First of all, he was a philosopher, a very intelligent man. So I was curious what he would say about the afterlife, considering he's an atheist. But he really had nothing to say. His idea of the afterlife is what people will think about me when I'm gone, and what I was able to do while I was here. But think about how long that really lasts. I mean, you might know your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, but do you go, how much further back do you really know? Do you know your ancestors 1,000 years ago? 2,000 years ago? 10,000 years ago? Do you know your ancestors that long? Of course not. Do we know the effects of their works? Of course not. Unless it's someone so famous that historically it was written down and we know what they did, like George Washington or something like that, we really don't know their history. And even that history may become obsolete one day. How much occurred in history that never got written down, never was put down anywhere. So, and I thought that was so shallow, and yet other philosophers were dealing with what this man has said, and they were like, oh wow, this is like, yeah, this is profound. No, it's not. It's sad. It's sad because there is no hope, and the fact is that if there is no God, if there is nothing, then death is the finale. And if death is not the finale, death will be the finale for this earth as well. Because we know that the earth is coming to nothing. Everything is coming. Everything's entropy. Everything's running down. Everything is breaking down. Whether it's tomorrow or 300,000 years from now, it's going to end. Whether it's be a coronavirus or something else, something's going to finish us off because we're not eternal. And there's nothing beyond this. And there is no hope. But Christ is our hope. Christ is the one who's come to let us know that there is meaning in this life and in the life to come. That he is the resurrection and the life. And that's the hope that we have because Christ is risen. Not because we think that he rose, not because we feel that he rose. And, like that song says, you ask me how I know he lives within my heart. No, you ask me how I know he lives because there's an empty tomb in Israel where he was and he rose. And there's so much evidence out there for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. If you ever doubt that, read Gary Habermas, who spent his whole life researching and writing on the resurrection. He actually has a massive volume coming out that Adria told me about, which is it's massive animal, talking about everything you can imagine about resurrection. So the evidence is overwhelming that indeed Christ is risen from the dead. But that's the life and that's the hope that we have. And we have to be that way. We cannot live as people who do not care. We have to be as people who do care, to show the kindness and mercy of God. Look at verse 16 and 17. They were all filled with awe and praised God. A great prophet has appeared among us, they said. God has come to help his people. This news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding countryside. Again, when we see the compassion of Christ and when we see the compassion of Christians, it becomes a witness about the love and mercy of God. And that's what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be a witness to the power and presence of God in this world. We cannot live in this world as narcissists and pretend that we're Christians. Well, we can. I'm sure a narcissist can pretend he's Christian. You can live that way. Yes, you can live as a narcissist. You can pretend you're a Christian. But you'll be shown eventually for what you are. But if you're really a Christian, if you're really a child of God, then you have to have the heart of God. That heart is in you when you were first born again, and it should be growing in you with every step, every day that passes by. Again, this is how God reacts to us, and we should care. We should care even though, again, we live in a world where people might look at us and say, well, why are you helping one person? Why are you doing this one thing? Because it is that meaningful. I was reading a story, and I wanted to close with a story about a typhoon that had occurred in Indonesia. And after the storm, there was havoc everywhere. And when the storm subsided, this little girl walked down to the beach and discovered millions of starfish that had been washed up on the shore. And so she spending all these hours throwing starfish back into the water, trying to rescue them. And after several hours, an elderly man walked up to the girl and noticed what she had been doing, and he said to her, "You foolish little girl." He belittles her. "You foolish little girl. Do you think that you're going to save all these starfish? Do you think that what you're doing is going to make a difference?" The little girl looked at the man, and she held up a starfish and said, "Well, sir, maybe not. But to this one, it makes all the difference in the world." That's a wonderful story. Because, again, yes, can we change the whole world? No, probably not. We can't, we're not within the position, within the power to do that. But we can change one life. We can help one person. And that is what we're called to do. We're not called. God's not going to hold you responsible for what the president does. He's not going to hold you responsible for what Putin does, or what the dictator of China does. He is going to hold you responsible for what you do, and what you're capable of doing, and what you were able to do. Again, we're in a time where there is a crisis. There's so much going on, and the question is, who cares? Well, first of all, God does. God has always been a caring God. And if people ask you, well, where is God? Where is God in all this? He's involved right in the midst of it all. He's with us. He sees our situation. He feels compassion. He's intervening for us. And if they have any doubt about it, then look at Jesus. Because Jesus is the greatest demonstration that God cares. God could have looked at a sinful humanity and said, you know what? Forget you guys. No matter what I try, you're still rebellious. But he doesn't. On the contrary, he sends his son into the world to die for our sins. God so loved the world that he sends his only son to die for us. That's such compassion. But again, an enacted compassion. Not something that simply views and feels bad for someone, but actually intervenes to do something. And he's died. He's taken upon all the horrors of this world upon himself to bring us redemption, to bring us healing. And so, who cares? God does. And so should we. So should we. We need to look at what we can do to be compassionate. Certainly not only as individuals. Individuals, certainly, if there is something within your power to do to help during this time, without, of course, contaminating yourself. No one's saying, I've heard some people, some people are jumping in. I know certain people who were heading out there to do good, and I told them, well, okay, I understand that because it's your profession, it's what you do, and you have that kind of thing, but take every precaution possible. Because again, we're not trying to save people by sacrificing other people. Everyone is precious, everybody's important. So certainly we need to take precaution, but what we can do, we should do to try to help. As individuals and also the church. I think this is they say this is a challenge for the church because we have to go online and do sermons. I think it's a greater challenge for the church. This is a great challenge for the church because we have to prove our mettle at this time. And, we as a church have been blessed. We have been provided for by the Lord. Maybe it is for a time such as this, where people will need help. And if the government cannot help them, if they cannot do things, then we have to consider, what can we do? What should we do? Now, as a church, we have done that many times, and some people know our record, especially for a small church, the many ways in which we have shown compassion to those who needed help. Well, here we are again, and the crisis is there. Who cares? The Lord does. I do. We, as all of us as Christians should. As a church, we should. And again, I've been encouraged to do this, and the Lord just put it in my heart, and just again, remaining faithful, be steadfast. This is a difficult time. We're going to get through it, but be steadfast. Stay in prayer. Again, shut off that TV. Don't get paranoid. Shut off the TV. Pray. Read the Word. Be in the Word, and encourage one another. Let us strengthen each other, especially as we see the day of the Lord arriving. God bless you all. I hope this message blesses you, and hopefully soon, God willing, we'll be able to come back into our service, into our fellowship. Until then, I really can't do anything from Sanctuary. I really can't. It would feel weird without you there. So I'll be doing it from here. God bless you. Have a great Sunday. Again, be a blessing to others as well. And if you have any need, please reach out to the pastor, reach out to me, reach out to the deacons. And there have been people in our church who've wanted to help, and they've offered their help. So if you need help, please let us know how we can help you. God bless you and take care.